They say the wealthiest and most perfect places are where you'll be treated with the utmost respect. But what happens when you step into a place you rightfully belong and are asked to leave simply because you don't look like you belong? A black woman is asked to leave a luxury gym in a high-end residential complex. She's doubted. Security is called. She's politely humiliated. But what no one knows is she's actually the chief of security, the executive overseeing the entire resident infrastructure. And within minutes, a community that thought itself exemplary is forced to take a hard look at its own reflection. This isn't just a confrontation, it's a reckoning, a journey from prejudice to awakening, from silence to change. And the final question remains: when the truth comes to light, who will have the courage to step out of the shadows? Aurora Heights, a luxury apartment complex perched quietly on a hill overlooking the river, was where the elite residents believed they had found their final oasis amid the suffocating city. Here, everything was designed to please even the most discerning. Facial recognition elevators, biometric fingerprint access keycards, and even unspoken internal codes, like always smiling politely at familiar faces and silently casting doubt on unfamiliar ones. On a July summer morning, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the maple trees planted along the granite walkway. Aurora awoke to birdsong and the gentle hum of automatic espresso machines inside quiet penthouses. On the third floor, the sleek glass-walled gym welcomed early risers, residents starting their day with yoga or a light jog. The space was spotless, cool, and filled with silent codes understood only by those who were part of the Aurora ecosystem. And this morning, a woman stepped in, quietly, without flourish, but her presence alone was enough to challenge that entire unspoken order. Dr. Elise Monroe, a black woman in her early 40s, tall, upright shoulders, sharp yet calm eyes, pushed open the gym door with an internal access keycard. No one paid attention, or rather, no one recognized who she was. She wore a light gray athletic jacket, black leggings, her hair pulled neatly into a high bun. No makeup, no jewelry, and no symbols that hinted at her status. Elise had just been appointed Chief Security Officer of the entire Aurora Heights development, a powerful position straddling security, legal oversight, and administrative management. She oversaw all entry systems, resident records, and the full security personnel team. But this morning, she wasn't there for an inspection. She had simply come to breathe. Placing her water bottle on treadmill number 6, the farthest, quietest corner, Elise started her warm-up at a light pace. She liked the steady rhythm of her breath, the feeling of her muscles waking up after a night of tense, strategic meetings. She had moved into Aurora just 3 days ago. No grand introduction, no welcome announcement to the residents. That was her choice. To live like any ordinary person. To see this place not through the lens of authority, but through the rhythm of daily life. But Aurora wasn't that simple. Across the gym, Victoria Granger, a white woman around 55, slim build, dressed head to toe in Lululemon, bright red lipstick, and meticulously curled blonde hair, stood observing from the lounge area. Victoria was the resident committee chair of Aurora, a familiar name in every meeting, every community chat group, every bulletin board, from organizing holiday festivals to catching residents who parked slightly outside the lines. She embodied soft power. No official management title, yet wielding strong influence through her dedication to upholding community standards. And this morning, Victoria spotted a stranger. She squinted at Elise, a woman of color with no visible resident badge, who had entered the gym through the technical corridor meant for management personnel. A newcomer, unfamiliar face, didn't attend last month's resident meeting, doesn't belong here, Victoria thought, her gaze sharp as a paring knife. Most people wouldn't have noticed anything unusual, but to Victoria, this was a moment to act for the safety of the community. She straightened her collar, closed her notebook, and walked over like an officer on inspection. Elise continued her light run, completely unaware that a citizenship inspection was heading her way, not because of any misconduct, but simply because of the color of her skin and the fact that she was unfamiliar to the gatekeeper of perceived belonging. Behind the glass panes glowing with morning light, the silhouettes of two women, one running, the other approaching with smug authority, crossed paths like two opposing currents. A seemingly small confrontation, yet one that would shake the very foundation of a community that thought itself flawless.
The sound of the treadmill remained steady, blending with the soft instrumental music emanating from the hidden ceiling speakers. The space was bright, airy, and infused with the scent of disinfectant and peppermint essential oil, meant to evoke a sense of relaxation, energy, and freedom. But with each step of Victoria Granger, gentle footsteps on the luxury-tiled floor, a ripple of tension began to spread like red wine bleeding into water. Elise sensed someone approaching. She didn't turn around. She kept her pace, steady and slow. She was no stranger to that kind of gaze. Years of working in high-level security, handling sensitive incidents for major corporations, had taught Elise how to read a room through footsteps and breath alone. And right now, every cell in her body knew someone was judging her, not for her actions, but for her presence. "Excuse me." A woman's voice rang out, polite but laced with steel wrapped in velvet. Elise stopped the machine, lowering the speed to 0. She removed her earbuds and turned around. Standing before her was a woman radiating authority. Notebook in hand, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses, lips pressed tightly as if ready to recite a regulation. "Are you a resident here?" Victoria asked, tilting her head slightly as though merely curious. Yet her eyes scanned Elise from head to toe like an invisible X-ray. Elise raised an eyebrow. No anger, no alarm. She was used to this kind of inspection, the silent interrogations when she entered 5-star hotels, golf clubs, or gated communities where she was the only person of color. "Yes, I live here," she replied calmly, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. "Really?" Victoria nodded, though her expression remained skeptical, as if words alone weren't sufficient proof. "When did you move in? I usually keep track of all new residents, and I don't recall seeing you at last month's meeting." Elise was silent for a second. Not out of hesitation, but considering whether to peel off the mask just yet. Then she gave a faint smile. "I moved in this Monday. I work in the operations department," she said simply, without emphasizing her title or flaunting her status. Victoria paused. Operations department? But she didn't look like an executive. No ID badge, no distinguishing markers, just a black woman in modest workout gear entering through a service corridor using the resident gym early in the morning, a piece that didn't quite fit Victoria's perfect Aurora puzzle. "Could you show me your resident card?" she asked, this time letting her suspicion show. Elise smiled lightly, unfazed. She stepped back and reached for her gym bag, resting on a nearby bench. "Of course," she said, unzipping the bag. "It's right here." But before she could pull it out, Victoria waved her hand. "No need. I'll just call the building manager to check the records. It's simple, really. We can't allow any unknown individuals to use the facilities. It's for the safety of everyone." In that moment, the air in the room seemed to drop several degrees, as if the AC had suddenly cranked up. Elise straightened, hand still on the zipper. She looked directly at Victoria. "I told you I'm a resident, and I have every right to use this space." Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't harsh, but carried a strange weight that made Victoria involuntarily take a small step back. "I'm only doing my duty. Your reaction suggests you might be hiding something," Victoria replied quickly, as if defending herself against the gaze that made her feel exposed. Elise said nothing more. She put the card back in her bag, zipped it shut, and stood tall. Her voice was soft as the breeze, yet firm as stone. "If you truly want to know who I am, then wait a few more minutes. You might see more than you expected." The air turned to ice. In the corner, a young man lifting weights quietly removed his earbuds. A woman, walking on a treadmill across the room, stole a glance their way. And in that moment, Aurora Heights was no longer a haven of calm, but a hidden stage of prejudice, where arrogance was about to collide with truth. Silence! The air in the Aurora Heights gym felt as though it was being held together by an invisible thread. Elise remained standing, composed, no flinching, no retreat. She simply looked straight at the woman before her with an expression both patient and cold, the look of someone all too familiar with being misunderstood, questioned, scrutinized, not because of behavior, but because of skin color and a level of status others found hard to believe she could possibly hold. Victoria Granger began to feel the loss of control. No resident card, no appearance on the latest meeting list. No one in the committee had mentioned a new black woman moving in, and now this woman dared to challenge her? Number Victoria wasn't going to let that slide. She wasn't used to being talked back to. She wasn't used to losing. She pulled out her phone without hesitation. On the screen, the Aurora internal app appeared with an emergency option, Contact Building Security. "I'll call right now. We have very clear regulations. Unidentified individuals are not permitted to use resident-only amenities," she said, her voice sharp as an ice pick. Elise tilted her head slightly as if watching an old play being performed for the 1,000th time, only with different actors. She didn't stop her, didn't argue. She quietly wiped her sweat, placed her water bottle back in her bag, then sat on the bench by the window, looking out, where the morning sunlight reflected gently on the artificial lake below. "Aurora Security Center, how may I help you?" "Yes, this is Victoria Granger from the Residents Committee. There's an unfamiliar woman using the gym, no visible ID, unable to confirm her identity. I suspect unauthorized access. Please send someone immediately." "We're on our way, ma'am." Less than 5 minutes later, 2 security officers arrived, dressed in dark navy uniforms with gleaming name tags pinned to their chests. They entered with polite but alert composure. Victoria quickly stepped forward and pointed, "She's the one." "Not on the resident list." I questioned her and received no cooperation. Might be an outsider, exploiting a security loophole. One of the guards turned to Elise, giving her a polite nod. "Apologies, ma'am. We received a report and need to verify your identity. If you have your resident card or any ID, we'll make this quick." Elise didn't rush. She stood, picked up her bag, and slowly unzipped it. This time, there was no need for silence. From the side pocket, she pulled out a small black card, sleek, minimalist, marked only with the silver logo of Aurora Group and the words Internal Access, Executive Division. She handed it to the guards. Both men froze for a second. "Ma'am, this is an Executive Division Internal Access card," the younger one murmured. Then, from the breast pocket of her jacket, Elise pulled out an official photo ID. Clear, unmistakable. Dr. Elise Monroe, Chief Security Officer, Aurora Heights. The air turned to ice. The older guard immediately bowed his head slightly. "We apologize, Director Monroe." "We didn't know." Elise nodded calmly. No reproach, no sarcasm, no need. By now, Victoria stood frozen, her mouth parted slightly as if trying to say something, but no words came out. Her face had gone pale, like someone who had swallowed a block of ice. "Director?" she whispered. "You're—" "The person responsible for overseeing all security, resident access and internal policy enforcement at Aurora Heights," Elise said slowly. "Including community reports, like yours." No need for a raised voice, no need for anger. The truth alone was enough to shatter Victoria's self-assured pride. "I asked for your card. If you'd shown it earlier, I wouldn't have called security." Victoria clung to her last thread of justification. Elise looked her dead in the eye. "The issue was never about the card, it was about how you looked at me from the very beginning, as if there was no way I could ever belong here." The air inside the Aurora Heights gym felt as though it had just endured a storm, even though outside the sky remained clear and sunlight still danced across the premium glass dome on the third floor. Victoria Granger, who had entered the room with the confidence of a self-appointed marshal of order, now stood frozen. Her lips dry, face flushing red and pale in alternating flashes like a faulty warning light. Meanwhile, Dr. Elise Monroe, the woman Victoria had doubted, interrogated, and summoned security to confront, simply stood there, calm as a still lake after a violent gust. "Director of Security?" Victoria repeated under her breath, as if she still couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Elise didn't respond. She simply nodded at the two security officers, silently signaling they could leave. They nodded quickly, bowed slightly, and backed away from the scene, as though they'd just avoided a social bomb on the verge of detonation. Only a few people remained in the gym now, but every eye, every slight movement, every glance behind tinted sunglasses or from the mirrored wall was now aimed at one person, Victoria Granger. And as if by reflex in this digital age, the first phone came out. A young man near the weight bench had silently recorded the exchange since the moment Victoria called security. He said nothing, just quietly typed a caption onto his screen. "When the resident committee chair tries to kick a black woman out of the gym, not knowing she's the new executive director of the entire development. Aurora Heights." This is what bias looks like. Elise didn't stop him. She knew what was coming. She'd seen it too many times. The truth didn't travel by word of mouth anymore, but through clips under 60 seconds. She looked at Victoria, the woman now trying to piece herself back together from the shards of reputation still flickering in her anxious eyes. I was just doing my duty. If I had known who you were, I would never." Elise cut in, not with anger, but with a question that froze the entire room. What if I weren't the director? What if I were just a single mother, a regular gym-goer, or a teacher? What would you have done to them? Victoria fell silent. She had no answer. She'd never considered it. Or perhaps she had just never had to answer it out loud. That morning, Elise left the gym without a single farewell. She didn't look back. She didn't need to say another word. The truth had done what it came to do, but the aftermath lingered and began to ripple like waves across the surface of the Aurora Lake. 1 hour later, Aurora Heights internal chat group, Cynthia M. "What happened at the gym? I heard Victoria called security on someone, and it turned out to be the new executive leader of the whole development, Aaron T. I just saw the clip on TikTok. It's going viral. This is bad. We can't let things like this happen in a so-called civilized community. Mira D. Not surprised. Victoria once questioned my son while he was waiting for a friend outside. Her reason? Didn't look like he belonged here. Admin Aurora. Management is working with CSO Elise Monroe to reassess our response and internal control procedures. Please remain calm and refrain from spreading unverified information. Victoria read each message with trembling hands. Every line only emphasized the truth she didn't want to face. Her reputation, the image of guardian of order, was collapsing. And this time, no one could shield her from the consequences. 3 days after the incident at the gym, the residents of Aurora Heights received an unusual email from the management board. Emergency Community Meeting Invitation. Topic: Building Community, Conduct, Equity and Shared Spaces. Time: 7 p.m. Venue: 5th Floor Hall, Aurora Community Center. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this was about Victoria and Elise, and this time it wouldn't be whispered behind closed doors, but faced out in the open. That evening, the Aurora Hall was packed. Elderly residents, young couples, long-time homeowners, and newly arrived families. Over 100 eyes focused on the long table where 5 members of the residence committee sat upright, as though preparing for an unofficial trial. In the front row, Victoria Granger sat motionless, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The careful makeup on her face couldn't hide the tension. Every glance from a neighbor cut through her like a silent blade. Across the room, Dr. Elise Monroe entered on time, composed. She wore a simple charcoal grey suit, neat and modest, her eyes sharp beneath brows that were firm, not furious. No introduction was needed. Everyone knew who she was. "Let's begin," said Marcus Hale, chairman of the Residence Committee, rising to his feet with a voice that was low and resolute. "We're not holding this meeting to spark conflict, but to foster conversation. A recent incident has shaken this community, and it's time we bring into the light the very things we've been avoiding." A heavy silence spread until a middle-aged woman in a floral dress stood from the 3rd row. "My name is Cynthia Moore. I've lived here for 8 years, and I've stayed silent for far too long." The hall fell still. Cynthia spoke, her voice trembling but firm, about the time Victoria had driven an Indian couple away from the BBQ patio because they didn't look like they belonged. About the group of black teenagers she blocked from entering the playground, demanding they present resident cards, even though they lived right in Block C. We were afraid, and we stayed quiet, thinking these were isolated incidents. But now I see it's a pattern, a repeated behavior, a kind of invisible power built on bias. A silver-haired man rose to his feet. "I'm Tom. My son was reported to security by Ms. Victoria for wearing a hoodie in the lobby. I thought it was just a misunderstanding, but maybe I was wrong." Then a young woman spoke up. "I once saw her scolding a housekeeper waiting outside for her employer because she didn't look like an Aurora resident. They were just talking quietly, doing nothing wrong." Voice after voice. A long suppressed tide was finally breaking. Fragments of prejudice coming together to form a picture that could no longer be denied. Victoria sat as if turned to stone. Her hands trembled. The justifications once poised in her mind now hung useless, because no one was listening anymore. At last, Marcus turned to Elise. "Director Monroe, would you like to say something?" Elise stepped up to the microphone. The warm yellow light cast across her face, resolute yet compassionate. "I didn't come here to demand punishment. I came because I believe in the power of truth. I was once asked, 'What if you weren't the director? How would this have gone?' And I know it would have gone very differently. Not everyone has a business card or authority to shield them from being misunderstood, but every resident deserves respect, either from the gatekeeper to the teenage kid finding his way. Aurora Heights cannot call itself a civilized community if we don't have the courage to look at the prejudice growing quietly within ourselves." The hall was utterly silent. Then a wave of applause erupted, at first scattered, then spreading, until it washed across every seat in the room. Victoria bowed her head, No one needed to condemn her. She could already feel the heaviest judgment of all, coming from within. A gloomy afternoon hovered over Aurora Heights, the sky blanketed by slow-moving grey clouds. No rain, yet no sunlight either. Much like the state of mind of the woman sitting in front of her computer screen. Victoria Granger. She was typing. But this time, it wasn't a new regulation or an email scolding a resident for misplacing a trash bin. It was a statement, a defense. Forum post, Aurora Internal Network. 4:37 p.m. Monday, a heartfelt message from a troubled resident. I, Victoria Granger, would like to share a few words from the bottom of my heart. The incident at the gym has weighed heavily on me. I've never intended to offend or discriminate against anyone. Everything I did for the safety of our community. Had I known Ms. Monroe was an executive director, I assure you things would have been different, but I didn't know when I acted out of duty. I apologize if my actions caused hurt, but I also hope people can look at the situation with fairness. She posted it, and within minutes, comments poured in like a downpour after days of heavy air. You're only sorry because you got caught. How many others have you interrogated who didn't carry an executive pass? This apology is just PR spin. Don't pretend to be heartbroken. This behavior has been going on for years. A few tried to defend her, but their voices were quickly drowned in a rising tide of public outrage. Meanwhile, at the Aurora Heights executive office, Elise was working on the 6th floor, where natural light was engineered to pass gently through anti-glare glass, bright enough to illuminate, but soft enough not to blind. A knock at the door. Raymond Shaw stepped in, Deputy Executive Director of the entire development. A white man in his 60s, neatly combed silver hair, smoke-grey shirt, and a tone as polished as if he had once trained at Oxford. Elise, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to speak privately. She nodded, closing her laptop. Raymond sat opposite her, his eyes polite, but not entirely neutral. I won't deny the seriousness of what happened. You handled it with great professionalism, but there's something I'd like you to consider. Elise said nothing. She waited. We're at a delicate phase. Some investment deals are awaiting approval. If this incident keeps escalating, it may tarnish Aurora's image, especially if the media picks it up as a symbol of discrimination in luxury communities. Elise tilted her head slightly. She already knew where this was going. We hope you'll consider withdrawing the formal complaint against Ms. Granger. Treat it as an internal reconciliation to avoid a media storm, or would that be possible? The silence after that request stretched longer than the entire exchange. Elise looked directly at Raymond, not angry, not cold, just one quiet question. You're asking me to stay silent, so others can stay comfortable, so no one has to be held accountable? Raymond sighed. I'm asking you to choose stability over confrontation. The world isn't perfect, but sometimes silence is the smarter move. Elise stood up, slowly. Her eyes held a terrifying clarity. Silence is exactly what has allowed people like Ms. Granger to act this way for years. And if even I, someone with a title, with power, am being asked to stay quiet, to keep the peace, then what hope is there for those without either? Raymond didn't respond. He only bowed his head, as though quietly scolded by his own conscience. Elise walked out, and the door closed behind her with no dramatic slam. But inside Raymond's chest, it echoed like a gavel pounding on the table of ethics. It was a quiet Friday afternoon. The city outside kept its relentless pace, but inside the 6th floor of the Aurora Heights Executive Tower, everything felt slower. Dr. Elise Monroe's office was modest, yet elegant. No excessive decor save for a small plant by the window and a wooden wall clock. Here, time didn't seem to pass by the minute, but by glances, by words, and by silences. There was a knock, 3 firm, evenly spaced taps. Elise looked up from a stack of documents. Her voice was calm, not loud. "Come in." The door opened and Victoria Granger stepped in, for the first time since the stormy residents' meeting. No more bright red blazers or plum-coloured lipstick. Today she wore a plain beige sweater, a bare face, and held an old leather handbag in hand. Her blonde hair was tied low, unusually neat. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Victoria said, her voice small, dry, like someone recovering from a long fever. Elise nodded, gesturing to the chair across from her. "What would you like to say?" Victoria sat down, set her bag beside her, and clasped her hands together, hands once used to hold microphones and read regulations, now visibly trembling. I didn't come to justify myself, though truthfully I still believe things went too far." Elise didn't respond. Her gaze was still, reflective, like glass. Not judgmental, but impossible to hide from. Victoria took a deep breath and continued. "I know I was wrong. Not just because of what happened with you, but because it's happened before. There are things I never realized. Or maybe I never wanted to admit. I thought that if I said I'm protecting the community, it would cover the shadows in my behavior." Her voice caught. "But now I know. Sometimes protection is the most elegant excuse for control." Elise remained silent. She didn't soften the atmosphere. She didn't rescue the moment. She waited to see if this apology was genuine or just the beginning of a carefully laid plan. Victoria paused, then leaned forward slightly. "I want to make things right. Maybe through a community event or a media campaign about diversity, understanding. If we appear together, speak together, co-sign, maybe the community will be more forgiving. And it could help reaffirm your leadership role too, couldn't it?" In that moment, the mask slipped. The apology was no longer whole. It revealed exactly what Elise had suspected. Victoria didn't just want redemption, she wanted to salvage her reputation by pulling Elise into one final performance. Elise looked at her for a long time. There was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet mix of sorrow and disappointment. "You don't need me to apologize. You need me to help restore your image." Victoria flinched. "No, I just thought that if we did this together." Elise cut in for the first time during the meeting. "Not everyone deserves to be humiliated, but not everyone deserves forgiveness just because they're afraid of losing their reputation." A long silence settled. Elise slowly stood, pulled a folder from her drawer, and placed it on the table. Inside are compiled reports from residents about discriminatory behavior over the past 5 years, all related to you. Some include videos, some are anonymous letters, but all of them agree on one thing: you thought you were protecting, but what you were really doing was excluding. Victoria froze. "I will not participate in any public reconciliation events, not because I hate you, but because I won't be part of a scripted apology." Elise walked to the door and opened it gently. Her voice was low and steady. "If you truly want to change, do it when no one is watching, when there are no cameras, when you have nothing left to preserve but your conscience." Victoria stood. She didn't cry, but her eyes were glassy. "Thank you for listening." "It's not listening," Elise replied. "I'm just watching to see if you're ready to be honest with yourself." After the tense private meeting, Victoria Granger returned to her apartment in Block A, 16th floor, once a source of pride each time she opened the window to overlook the dazzling nightscape of Aurora Heights. But tonight, the lights no longer brought her peace. She sat in the dark. No lamps, no TV, no phone. Only the ticking of the wall clock and a sigh that seemed to stretch endlessly. For the first time in her life, Victoria understood what it felt like to be seen with the same eyes she once used on others, suspicious, distant, judging. No one texted, no one called to check in. Those who once cheerfully called her the gatekeeper of the community were now silent. And what hurt the most wasn't the criticism, it was the indifference. 3 days later, at the Aurora Community Center, Elise Monroe stood in a small room surrounded by just about 12 people, most of them people of color, immigrants, or newly moved residents from different neighborhoods. There were no cameras, no press, just plastic chairs arranged in a circle and cups of water on an old wooden table. "I didn't call this meeting to give a speech," Elise began, her voice soft. "I just want to listen and understand what's truly missing in this place, this so-called residential paradise." An Asian man shared how his daughter had once been called the help while playing on the lawn. A brown-skinned woman recounted being questioned repeatedly because she didn't look like a homeowner, even while holding her own keys. A young black man described sitting through his first community meeting for 30 minutes, and not a single person speaking to him. Elise listened. She didn't interrupt. She made no promises. She understood that healing didn't begin with speeches, but with presence, quiet, patient. And then, as the room continued to open up, someone else stepped in, gently, as if afraid to disturb the fragile breath of the space. It was Victoria. No applause, no smiles, but no one asked her to leave. She didn't sit in the center. She chose a folding chair tucked into a dim corner, where the light didn't fully reach her face. Her hands rested on her lap, slightly trembling, but her eyes never left the speakers. When Elise noticed her, she didn't react. She simply gave a slight nod, a signal that sometimes presence alone is a beginning. When it came to Victoria's turn, she didn't speak. She didn't justify. She simply stood, walked to the table at the back, and poured water for each person, silently, without expecting acknowledgement. The meeting ended around 9 p.m. A light rain had begun to fall. Elise stood in the hallway watching as the first few attendees stepped out, their expressions lighter than when they arrived. Victoria approached, lightly soaked, having brought no umbrella. Elise handed her a tissue. She didn't say anything. Victoria accepted it, offering a faint, wry smile. "I'm not asking anyone for forgiveness. I just want to do something kind without anyone needing to notice." Elise replied softly, eyes on the rain. "Then you're heading in the right direction." To take root at Aurora Heights. Gone were the announcement posters slapped across the lobby walls with bold titles like "New Regulations." In their place were quiet, steady acts from within. Executive Office, 6th floor. Inside her quiet office, Dr. Elise Monroe spread out a map of Aurora, not to study fire exits or underground wiring, but to observe the disconnected zones of the community. With a red pen, she marked, "Playground. Block B, no welcoming supervisors. Very few children from minority backgrounds present. Library, 2nd floor. All events organized by long-term residents with little to no outreach to new ones. Rooftop sports deck. Only 3 out of 20 regular users were non-white residents." Elise smiled faintly, not in satisfaction, but because at last the invisible gaps had names. And when something has a name, it can be filled. She began outlining new plans. Resident Partner Program, pairing long-term residents with newcomers to attend events together. Aurora Cultural Week, a celebration where each community group hosts a day of performances, food sharing, and storytelling. Diversified Community Advisory Board, formed by those whose voices had been overlooked for too long. At first, no one believed Elise could pull it off. But everything began to change when she personally visited each block, knocking on doors, introducing herself, not as a director, but as a neighbor who's here to listen. And then, something unexpected happened. Victoria Granger, once the community's most resistant wind, appeared on the volunteer sign-up list to assist with youth sessions at the Saturday afternoon activity centre. No one knew why. She didn't announce it. She didn't ask Elise for permission. She simply arrived early, cleaned tables, poured water, prepared art supplies and cookies. When the children arrived, they didn't know who she was, and perhaps that was exactly what she hoped for. One day, Elise happened to stop by the centre. She walked in during an art session titled Community Through My Eyes. The children were laughing, chatting, pasting coloured paper and drawing people holding hands. In a far corner, Victoria knelt down, helping a boy adjust a crooked paper heart. No cameras, no applause, just the sounds of scissors, markers, and a quiet warmth that had never been seen in her before. After the session, Elise sat with the program coordinator. She doesn't talk much, the coordinator shared. But she's always the first to arrive and the last to leave. She never sits at the centre, she's just present and kind. Elise stepped out of the centre, holding a drawing a little girl had given her. 3 figures holding hands, one white, one black, one Asian, beneath a scribbled phrase, "Home means everyone." The wind blew gently. Elise smiled, not because she'd won, but because finally change was taking root in the very soil that had once seemed barren. It was an early autumn afternoon. A cool breeze swept through the central plaza of Aurora Heights. Maple trees had begun to turn gold, and the air carried the scent of dry leaves, mingling with the distant laughter of children playing nearby. On the outdoor stage, a large banner fluttered in the wind. Aurora Cultural Week, one community, many voices. Below, rows of vibrant booths lined the square. Indian cuisine, traditional Mexican dance, Japanese tea ceremony, Vietnamese mooncakes, and a small art corner with chalk-written words, "We all belong here." 5:30 p.m. main stage. Elise stepped out from backstage, a nameplate clipped to the mic stand reading, "Closing speaker, festival finale." She wasn't in a blazer nor formal attire, just a white shirt and grey khaki pants. She wasn't here to speak as the director. She was here as a witness and as a pathmaker. I once thought I could understand this community through reports and floor plans. But then I realized no one understands a neighborhood better than the people living in it. And no one truly belongs anywhere until they're invited to step on the stage. She smiled softly, lowered the mic, and stepped aside. And then someone walked up. Unexpectedly, Victoria Granger. No one called her name, no drums. But as she stepped onto the stage, the entire plaza fell silent. She wore a simple cream blouse, no makeup. The setting sun cast a gentle glow on her face, softening the lines near her eyes, making her look real, unguarded. She stood before the mic and drew in a deep breath, as though she'd waited a lifetime for the courage to speak. "My name is Victoria Granger, and I once believed I was the protector of this community's culture. But the truth is, I became the barrier to the very diversity Aurora was meant to embrace. No interruptions, no applause. I was wrong, not once, but many times. And what hurts me the most is not the exposure, but realizing this. There are people who left this place because of me. Children who once felt they weren't welcome because of me. I can't change the past, but today I choose to stand in this light, not so my mistakes are forgotten, but so I never repeat them again." Elise stood in the wings, eyes fixed on Victoria, not out of surprise, but because this woman had finally chosen the light, not to shine, but to take responsibility. Victoria bowed her head, stepped down from the stage. No one clapped, but a little girl, around 7 years old, brown-skinned, curly hair, seated in the front row, came forward and handed Victoria a messy drawing. "You're the one in the middle," the girl said. "I drew 3 people holding hands. You're in the middle, I think." You're learning how to hold hands again. Victoria took the drawing, eyes glistening. She didn't say a word. She simply took the girl's hand, truly. A photo was taken, no one knows by whom. Elise on the left, Victoria in the middle, the little girl on the right. 3 people, 3 skin tones, holding hands beneath a golden rain of fallen maple leaves. That photo was later pinned to the community centre bulletin board. No caption, only one quiet line beneath it. Belonging begins with listening. This isn't just Elise Munro's story. It's not just about being kicked out of a gym because of prejudice. It's not just the fall of a woman who once believed she was protecting the community. It's the first collision between a condescending gaze and a truth that could no longer be ignored. It's the story of so many of us, those who've been judged for how they dress, the color of their skin, or simply because they don't look like they belong. But the remarkable thing is, not everyone chooses to fight back with anger. Some choose to listen, some choose to rebuild, and some, like Elise, choose to use power to heal, not to retaliate. What about you? Have you ever been dismissed because of how you look, where you come from, or because you didn't fit in with the majority, or have you ever stayed silent when someone else was treated unfairly out of fear that you'd be next? Share your story in the comments below, because maybe, just maybe, your voice could be the courage someone else needs to rise.